Assalamu alaikum and welcome to NBA Muslims, Art and Society. This is our first installment of a new NBA Muslim interview series, and we'll be having guests that are artists, both visual artists, performing artists, a whole plethora of spoken word. And joining me today is producer Khalil Ismail. Hold on one second. That's what happens when it's live. So it made me rethink the whole live thing. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm I was like, he's so great, but he's in the woods now. Okay, so let's go back on. Let me try to go back on script for a second. Joining me today is producer Khalil Ismail, and he will be talking about his video Man Up and manhood in an African American Muslim context, which I'm really excited about because manhood is consistently something that is constantly changing in society, especially here in the United States. So the idea of what comprises manhood shifted in the last few decades. Consequently, elements of masculinity
Go ahead.
that make out vilified as toxic. Across cultural lines, men continually assess and reassess what comprises manhood in the context of their social spheres, including African American Muslim men. Joining us today is producer Khalil Ismail, who will talk about his artistic social commentary on African American Muslim manhood, presented in the song and video Man Up featuring Etan Thomas. Now, I hope that we could, I think that we should I want to get you back to your family, back to your Eid. So I'm going to kind of just skip over the biography. We all know that you're a great artist and an activist, and you do so much, and you're so talented. So that goes without saying, all right? I want to get into this video, Man Up. I've had to watch that video multiple times, okay, because there's so many layers to it, okay? The first thing is that really caught my attention is that you decided to use the term man up. And I mean, in this day of toxic masculinity and terms like that being derided consistently in the society, what made you decide to use it anyway?
Well, I mean, honestly, I was approached, to be honest, about doing something like this. And when the person told me, you know what, you should really speak on this, because we have these conversations amongst men who are in community leadership positions all of the time, right? But a lot of times what happens is, because of, like what you said, the pressures of people naming or claiming things, everything is, if you're an aggressive man or anything like that today, many people are considering it toxic or teaching toxic masculinity, and say, let's address it head on. So understanding what's going on, I spend a lot of time in my city, like in my inner city, Baltimore, right? And I spend a lot of time, good amount of time with the youth. Oftentimes it's the youth who don't have fathers or mentors and that type of thing. So, it really, and then I spend a lot of time I just spend time with men who care, like, you know what I'm saying? Men who care, and I see where they're often misunderstood. And so, I wanted to, and then of course I see a lot of things that happen. I see a lot of things that are going on, when it comes to like, the lack of responsibility within our community. I wanted to speak to all of that. I wanted to speak to both the people who are actually doing good and are caring, and speak to those who are, who maybe need a little bit of guidance.
Okay. Well, that's interesting that you mentioned like the culture, because there are a couple of things that the video that you outline in the song, and that is obvious in the video. The first is the visual commentary, specifically the young man in the boxing ring with the older gentleman, which I found profound, because in the song you talk about the media and attempts to strip specifically Black men of their masculinity in whatever form that presents itself in the culture. So it seems like the young man is in this constant fight that the older man has to teach him. And is that something that is consistently occurring in the culture, that older men, like you said, who care, find themselves having to prepare younger men for this battle for their manhood?
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, it was more of, and even though a lot of people might have saw the young guy as the feature was actually more about the older guy than it was. And I actually interviewed, and one of these days I'm gonna put it out. I did an interview. So this is a guy. His name is Calvin, and he spends most of his time actually in a boxing ring helping people who wouldn't have anything to do because they don't have the options that say regular people. A lot of people do. He took the guy who he had, the young guy who he had mother, father on drugs, that type of thing. So he took him under his wing. And he's actually he was the lightweight champion. He's from Baltimore. He was actually the current lightweight champion. But why he was really there, because this older guy decided that he was going to dedicate a lot of his life to helping the young boys understand mainly how to discipline the fight. Because what's happening now is, what's happening a lot when you see a lot of young people complaining about what the young people are doing, and we talk about lack of jobs or whatever. But before there's even before education, there has to be discipline. Even before education, if you don't have discipline, you won't study. You won't be able to pay attention to your studies and that type of thing. So I chose that particular thing because they won't ever actually take it anywhere, right? But you can use this is one of the ways you can things you can use, one of the mediums you can use to teach a boy discipline. Now, once you have discipline, you can take discipline and apply it to any part of your life, whether you want to, whether you become a person who goes deep into education, or you become a person who's, who ends up with a, carpenter job, or you end up, whatever. Discipline is the beginning. So when you have men who take the time to mentor young black men, it makes a difference in helping them stay on a positive course.
But I mean, this fight that you allude to in the actual song, that all of the different things that a young black male has to face from the time of birth. There are all these stereotypes and all of these systems put into place to strip him of his manhood, whatever that definition is. And we'll get into that because I'm really interested in your take on manhood in the Islamic context. And you hear my men back here, right? Is that part of manhood? Is that part of manhood, brother? Like your woman got something going on and you still running?
Oh God, yeah.
Like how you do that right now? All right, so let me just try to play it off. Right. Hold on one second. Excuse me. Thank you. So this whole idea of these systems that they have to struggle against. So you're saying that the boxing represents, and the older gentleman represents, this transference of discipline, because it takes this discipline, because these systems are going to exist, and our society has shown that they're going to exist. Seems like in perpetuity, like constantly. So you have to be disciplined and ready for that fight and for that battle, and also establish your conception of what a man is and man up to that. Okay, so let's get a little bit into that whole concept of man up, because I find one thing very, very interesting, especially in the African American Muslim context. There's so much contrast, and I love brothers for this. There is so much unapologetic contrast to the transitions that's occurring in this definition of manhood. So like I said, you have this whole idea of toxic masculinity. And it's been, from my observations, I see African American men in particular very resistant to kind of allowing that to overtake their ideas and the way that they present their manhood. So, and it seems very, very conducive to Islam. So this whole idea of men are maintainers and protectors, to the protectors part, and this responsibility that they have, okay, even though there are definitely challenges that they face because of it, there seems to be at least this embrace of manhood in the role of maintainer and protector as a Black African American. It's not always conducive with society. So this whole idea
breaking up. Hold on.
Can you hear me out? I know. I'm so sorry. You're in the woods.
Yeah, no, it's like I didn't even know I knew I was going to a park. You know how you take your family? Okay, we're going here.
Man enough.
So, yeah.
You're man enough.
What was the last?
What to do? You gotta satisfy her. You gotta keep them happy.
Right. That's right. That's right. It's true.
It seems like it's very much a contrast. So stemming from like Malcolm X, who kind of like came on board right at the time where you had this second wave of feminism. So he's telling African American Muslim males to take on this role, okay, which is also very Islamic. But it seems like some Muslims are even are hesitant at doing that, and it seems like there is at least this promotion of it in African American Muslim male culture. So this whole idea of you being the head of the family is something that is definitely a part of Muslim culture, but African American Muslim males seem to encourage it more. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and I think that here's the thing, and I honestly, I think challenges like the categorization of toxic masculinity, and even how feminists are kind of going after the definition of manhood today, can be good because I believe there are reactions, to a state that we have fallen into as men. Like I find, for example, that a lot of men today like to blame feminism, for example, or blame these kind of almost new age categorizations as the reason. But wait a minute, this did not just come it didn't come out of a bubble. Like at the end of the day, it came as a reaction to people who didn't feel safe and needed to carve a space for themselves. And so when I look at it, I'm like, our job then is to create the space. Not like at the end of the day, like when you're looking at people who are reacting, for example, to oppression, then everything you do is not even going to be right. Because at the end of the day, like you're reacting and you're traumatized, and when you're reacting to trauma, you can't do everything perfectly or correctly, right? But you got to create a system and carve a space. It's kind of like, when someone is fighting an abuser, it started with abuse, right? So when you're fighting back an abuser, you might end up killing him by accident. He didn't kill you, but you might end up killing him by accident. You went a little further than he did, but because it was a response. Like at the end of the day, you got to deal with that because it's not like now if we were in a state where we were building systems of safe spaces and communal spaces, and that was our number one priority. Maybe we could look at what some of the issues that of the definitions that are coming across that may be attacking men. We could look at that a little bit more. But until we're doing that, we're doing our basic job. Then we have to look past that and continue to carve our own definitions and then have the safe spaces ready for those who are available for them. So, like going back to the video, in the there's the other section where you have the guy who has his daughter, right? And the backstory behind that though is that this is a guy who had to fight in courts to get his daughter. You know what I'm saying? Because at first his ex was not allowing him to see her. So, it was literally a 2-year battle. So I chose him because not only just because of what you saw, but because of the fight before that. That's actually why I chose him. And then, you see him nurturing and caring, for that person while he's still doing what men do, whether that be, whatever men do, like we have to like, so I'm really trying to show a balance,
Mm-hmm.
of the a real man is a nurturer and a caretaker
Mm-hmm.
as well as strong. You see what I'm saying? He's both, right? And like what happens is we like to, as human beings, we like to go from one extreme to the other. Okay, you know what? Because like if we see signs of aggression in men, then we want to take all the aggression away. No, some aggression is good. You know what I'm saying? And then, by taking all the aggression away, now we have men who don't even feel the need or have the desire to step up and lead. Because they're like, okay, you know what? When we're in a place where women got it or women can do it. No, Allah gave you the responsibility to lead. Regardless of whether she or some women decide that she doesn't want it or not, that's not, whatever, that's not your concern. Like at the
Yeah.
end of the day, the people who will come will come. So, so I think with the video, it was really kind of like you said, like it's talking about some of the things, obviously society. And we know if anybody has read, kind of basically what people have tried to do with us, or the powers that be have tried to do with us, is they're trying to stop the black messiah. They're trying to stop the black leader who will come and help, you know what I'm saying, um, uh, lift us, They're always in a state of trying to stop that or stave that off. And that's been happening since before COINTELPRO, but COINTELPRO documented it. You see what I'm saying? And
Mm-hmm.
so now we're in a state where, if you look at some of what the black conscious community is talking about, like you'll find them, they're even talking about like they're doing it through food warfare. You know what I'm saying? And,
Yeah,
so
yeah, the deserts.
yeah, and they're doing it through what they're putting in the water. Like they're saying it, they're actually trying to make men more feminine through, what's going on in with the water. Allah knows best, right? I'm not. I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna be honest. I don't get that deep into that because Allah knows best. I don't have the evidence. I don't like to follow things where I don't have hard evidence. But at the end of the day, I do see where they're going with that. You know what I'm saying? Because it's in the black community where you find the most blatant representations of feminine men. Like it's very interesting that they use black men to show the most blatant representations of feminine men. You know what I'm saying? It's very
Yeah.
interesting to me that they use us to do that. And like you said, and so it's only right that we have the most blatant representation of pushing back against that.
Mm-hmm.
But the video is really to show that it's our job to be both gentle and strong. It's our job to be both, you know what I'm saying, leaders and listeners. You understand what I'm saying? It's really to show that, and it's hard to do in a 4-minute music song and a video. But in this one, is really kind of telling men that, hey, look, regardless of what's happening in society, take some autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
Independent. And look, there are things that you can do for yourself, to fight some of this.
Okay. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned feminism in particular, because there is this allergy, this huge allergy. American Muslim men have to feminism, and I actually got a little irritated one day, and I put a meme up. I said, everyone railing against feminism need to appreciate how much of their resistance language comes from it. And I mean, you said to create these safe spaces that, if men were creating safe spaces, then I don't think that feminism would be that much of a threat, because if anything, it's a voice. It's a platform to exert a position and a voice, and that shouldn't be threatening to Muslim men that women want to exert their voices, especially Muslim men who are really truly leaders, because they want to hear what the people who are being oppressed and downtrodden have to say. And so I think, it's kind of refreshing. I very rarely hear an African American Muslim male use feminism and not blast.
because at the end of the day, and especially I would say with this for Muslims, and one of the things about many of African American Muslim communities, and maybe the only ones that did not, but even them, but many African American Muslim communities who converted to Islam, and especially learned from immigrant communities, unfortunately, they inherited a lot of the misogynistic tendencies of some of the places back where they, where they studied from. Just being real, right? And so, and a lot of this, I believe, has to do with why those families were decimated and those communities were decimated, as opposed to, let's say, that did not happen with, say, the Nation of Islam communities or even Warthin communities to the same extent. You see what I'm saying? I think it's because we follow, like, and follow, as when it comes to relationships in our relation, like, as one of the things that I feel like African Americans had that we already innately had, even culturally, is that we had a better feel for listening to and even from a romantic standpoint of seeing our women as human beings, right? And when we hooked up, and we started listening to some of these lectures.
That's the last few up a little bit, and can you repeat the last few sentences because you broke up a little bit, and it sounded like you were saying something really profound.
Oh, okay, yeah, it sounds like it's breaking up. Can you hear me better now?
See, I told you before you were going to be dropping too much knowledge, so
SubhanAllah, man. MashaAllah.
We got to stop. Wait a second. He's talking about feminism and not feeling threatened. No, we got to cut him off right now. Stop breaking.
I mean,
you were saying that we had a better feel of what?
We had a better feel as African Americans culturally for respecting our women and seeing them as human beings. From and I think when for example, we started listening to a lot of these lectures that, let's be real, they dehumanized women in the context of marriage. You know what I'm saying? In the context of what they had the ability to do and and how they should affect the world. I mean, in many places, still to this day, they're still getting to the point where they allow women to speak publicly. You see what I'm saying? In public spaces in certain places. This is what we have to understand. If we learned our Islam from these people, filtered down into how we govern our families, right? So, yeah, when I see a lot of Muslims adopting some of the strategies that feminism may adopt, I get it, because you got to fight tooth and nail and claw just to, okay, you know what? You're not gonna just take my humanity away from me, right? Now, I personally, I don't agree with everything, but then feminism is also, it's a very wide, to me, there's a very wide range of how people are defining feminism, and not every, and I tell you what, the women who I roll with, like, they don't, like, there's some aspects that they agree with and some they don't, and so I don't believe in this whole zero-sum kind of thing that's going on with feminism. You know what I'm saying? Where you take, no, like you said, look at, like, whenever I see people who don't have the power of another people speaking and it's yelling out, my question then becomes, why? You have to first ask yourself the question. There's a reason why this is happening. And the women that I know, my experience with women that I know is that when they actually feel safe enough to trust you, they'll chill out. But getting them to feel safe enough to trust you, that's a different story. You know what I'm saying? Because of all the things that happen, and that could be passed down generationally or whatever. You see what I'm saying? So I understand where it comes from. I understand where it comes from. And I believe, like, when you look at the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and how he listened to the people who they might have even had a conclusion that he had to correct. But what he did was he listened. He said, and often he didn't interrupt the conversation before. He listened to everything that was said. Okay. You know what I'm saying? And then, and recently I was, talking to a sister, and she was like, Allah telling me about an ayat of Quran where Allah says, I hear the woman who complains. And that's all he says. I hear the woman who complains, right? So what's happening, I believe, with a lot of our reactions to feminism is a little bit of guilt, because there's a lot of men, for example, who become materially successful, right? They're men. We have, as Muslims, some of us have big conferences. We have we have put our money into what we feel is important. But I worked at a Muslim women's shelter for 7 years, right? And the amount of struggle that the sister who I work with just had to do just to get the support or the interest for men to feel like it was important enough to make that a priority, told me that we have our priorities wrong. Because at the end of the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we go back to him, whether we were able to build these big conferences and stuff where we can all meet, that's one thing. But Allah didn't ask us to do that. What Allah did ask us to do is be protectors of women, right?
Yeah.
Allah is very clear about that. Protector for women can mean a different thing depending on that person. For example, protecting your wife is different from how you protect a woman who you might see on the street. You know what I'm saying? In some ways, just being an ear to someone who's been traumatized is a protection. You see what I'm saying? So when we decide that Allah gave us a responsibility, and that's the number one thing when it comes to our women, if we look at if we frame how we relate to women from a standpoint of it's a response to protect souls, and that Allah, Allah put, women, like, at the end of the day, there are going to be evil men in the world, right? Yeah. Our job is to protect them from evil men, not by telling them what to do all the time, not by controlling them or micromanaging their affairs, but by just having a space so that you do what you do without being accosted, by other people who want to see you down. You know what I'm saying? So that's how and the Quran informs me of that, to be honest. The Quran does. Like, it's clear to me. Like, it's not even hard. Like, in marriage, all the way to the standpoint of what Allah says. Like, Allah says to, and so to Mutahina, he's like, when a woman comes to you from the outside, then, make sure she believes, and then don't send her back, right, out to the disbelievers, right? Yeah. So I can see that was speaking to a certain context, but I can look at the universal meaning and say, we have we have sisters out. We just did an event out in Baltimore where, we were talking about, how do we really ask the sisters, how can we keep you safer? Because there's a lot of single women out here, and we don't even know, like, a lot of men don't even know the struggles of single women, especially ones who are wearing hijabs that are identified a certain way. How do we, like, the first thing we need to do is care about it, right? Then once we care about it, I think anyone who cares about it and actually listens to the arguments can say, okay, you know what? With all these women who have been taken advantage of, or who have been feminist, then I can see why there has been a rise of people who have attached to some of the concepts of feminism, regardless of whether I agree with it all or not. I don't have to agree with everything to see why it's happening, or why, or why somebody attaches to it.
Well, I want to roll back a little bit, because that you mentioned that once African American Muslim men were the messaging that they received, the overwhelming messaging that they received early in the Black Muslim movement in particular. So let's go back. We have Malcolm X, and even Elijah Muhammad is catching women, caretaker of women, all women, your wives, your mothers.
Say the last statement. Say the last statement again. I'm sorry.
Men being the protectors of women. Mm-hmm. That was the prevailing message, was that you have to, being a man means that you have to protect this woman and protect your women in particular. If someone puts their hands on you, as Malcolm puts their hands on them, then they need to die. And that really shifted. And you said, because we started to learn from systems that were misogynistic, very misogynistic in and of themselves. So the messaging very much shifted to controlling women, controlling as many women as possible, controlling every aspect of what a woman is and what a woman does, as opposed to you being the protector and maintainer of this person so that they feel safe. And so that safety kind of left. Okay, and you found many African-American Muslim women in particular found themselves be safe again. Okay, and so I think that's very much where a lot of the language that they adopted, because that's what basically, you know, a lot of it is about language that they adopted, so that they can feel safe again, because the African American Muslim men were the ones that were not keeping us safe. And it's not something that's just exclusive to African American Muslim men. Let's be honest. I mean, in this country, the least safest woman is her home, her husband, if they're abusive. And I mean, it runs rampant through the country. And then it goes on. There's other systems. College students, young college women are not safe at college. You know, the office space. That's why you have all the sexual harassment laws in place, because women in general are not safe. And so what once was a message to African Muslim men that attached their manhood to their ability to keep women safe and nurtured became one of control. And so I think that I'm hoping that is that shifting back again now? Are we going to get, because, you know, one of the things that I use as an example is right after Trump was elected, okay, you know, Muslim women, everyone was like, they were running around the country, you know, white rage was running rampant, and Muslim women were targeted. And they did not feel safe from the outside culture, all right? Especially covered Muslim women, you know, not only covered Muslim women, because you're still black and brown, even if you don't cover, but covered Muslim women were just the most obvious targets. And this whole idea of, well, you know, when you turn around and you're saying, listen, I don't feel safe to Muslim masculinity, the answer that you give is like, well, maybe you want to think about taking it off. You know, so it's not better off. You know, what did that say about the shift and what what has happened, you know, as opposed to like Malcolm X saying, look, go ahead, you want to touch one of our women? Go for it and see what happens to you. To telling the woman, to telling the victim, well, maybe, you know, you just want to take it off, because you could just like kind of take it off. And I'm not responsible. I don't have to worry about it anymore. You don't have to worry about it anymore, despite the fact of, you know, the emotional and spiritual trauma that it causes a woman to have to decide to take it off if she's doing it, to be allowed. That's notwithstanding. You know, it's just that I don't want to protect you the way that I'm supposed to protect you. So why don't you take it off? So is there a shift back to, has it always been there, but it needs to be strengthened again? Or do we need just like really just a paradigm shift back to this idea of attaching manhood to protector and nurturer?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a shift going both ways. There's a shift going away and a shift going forward. And I think what's happening now is a lot is kind of separate through adversity. A lot is separating those who are serious, you know what I mean, for those who are not. And we're starting to see more and more and more who's serious about the protection of us, you know, and who is placating, you know, to the system, you know. And, you know, I would say in this day and age, it's not easy, because let me give you an example. Let's say you have a protection-minded man, you know, they know that, okay, you know what, you know, but, you know, bottom line is, as a protection-minded man, you have to also be smart, because if you go about seeking vengeance the wrong way, then you end up in jail, and then your family doesn't see you. And then if you were a provider, now you're one less provider. You see what I'm saying? And that's why part of it is system-based. You know, part of it, the system is definitely catered to make sure that they want women to not seek their protection from their men in their community, and to seek their protection from the state or from the police. You see what I'm saying? That's how they want it to be. As long as you don't feel, you need to feel more safe with us than you do with your own kind. And it's a really subtle kind of thing. We have to be smart about it. But one of the things that I think we could do a whole lot better if we put our energy to is, you know, kind of a group thing. Like, you know, at the end of the day, and we're talking about in our meeting is, how can we, for example, why don't we all have more, why don't we have each other's contact numbers? Why don't we know where people live? You know what I'm saying? Why can't we, okay, the sisters who are single, You know, we need to have an app, for example, where something happens, they can send it off or push button or something where they feel a little bit like, okay, you know what? If I go missing for 3 or 4 days, you see what I'm saying? At least somebody will come and find me. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, I think there's a shift because our parents, like my parents' generation, we got to remember they did start this thing, right? And what happened was a lot of them, when they were starting to trying to build their community, were infiltrated. A lot of them went to jail, and the ones who didn't go to jail were so scared. They're like, you know, I just need to fall back and just kind of work in this 9 to 5, getting my money and trying to take care of my immediate family, because they were heartbroken because a lot of their community efforts were destroyed by outside forces. And so, but I think part of that also had to do with the fact that while that was happening, also we were also bringing in the misogyny thing, and I don't think Allah protects things that aren't sincere. And so while we were also protecting women, we were protecting women from the outside, we were not protecting from the inside. The emotional abuse. There was a lot of emotional abuse in our community back. And I would venture to say a lot of it was even unintentional, because you're talking about men and women who were converting from one lifestyle, and then all of a sudden deciding, okay, you know what, this is how I'm going to run things this way. And then who are they learning from? So it's like it's not like, okay, this real easy answer, like, you know, and it's not just a matter of people have nefarious intentions and some people don't, you know, like, no, like a lot of this stuff was like, okay, man, like I can look at some parents and the generations ahead of us and go, man, you know, like you really tried your best, but man, you really screwed up right there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And both are really the thing. And what our job to do is to try to figure out, they already paved the way. You know, we try to figure out and learn from, you know, the mistakes and from the good things that our parents, because one of the things our parents' generation did do as African American is that just as good as 20 years ago, women would talk about how they didn't have to worry about, if they covered, they didn't have to worry about being accosted on the street.
Yeah.
Because they knew, it's, you know, like if you were Muslim, we had this reputation of being kind of crazy in that way, right? And that was actually good. But one of the things that I do think that has made this more of a problem is that now there's a much higher, to be honest, immigrant representation of Islam, right? And the majority, let's be real, the majority of the immigrants who came here, they came here not to practice Islam, but to increase their business, increase their affluence business-wise, right? And so even if you ever learn the oath that they have to take when they come here, just to become a citizen, that we as African Americans don't have to take because we're already citizens. The oath that they have to take, basically to pledge allegiance to the sovereignty of this place. You understand what I'm saying? So when you look at that from a standpoint of now, when they feel like their safety is being threatened, they're going to have a different way of going about it. And a lot of their ways, and I'm not saying all immigrants. I'm only talking about some, because I don't like to generalize everybody and put everyone in the same pot. But a lot of what we see in the media representation is this, and we talked about this before, this apologetic attitude. And what that has done to me, one of the things it has done, it has taken away the mystique that, let's say, even people like the Nation of Islam had, where when you saw Muslims, you saw strength. Yeah. Now when you see Muslims, you see, oh, we're trying to be just like you. Yeah. And just like, and like the bottom line is, anyone who, for example, attacks and accosts innocent people or murders innocent people, they're already like animals. Yeah. And smell blood, they attack. Or any animal, when they smell fear, they attack, right? So because we have shown our fear, and we have shown a lack of willingness to say, look, I don't care what you do, but if you come after our women, whatever the repercussions are going to be in my spot. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? And the only place where you still find that is probably the hood.
That's because in American society, it is extremely important that the dominant white culture, strips anyone outside of it, any men outside of it, of their masculinity. It's done across the board. Okay. Right. It's happened to Asians. When they came, so they really feminized the Asian male, made him less threatening. At first, it wasn't as difficult to do to the African American Muslim male because they were in chains. So they definitely wasn't. They definitely weren't a threat then. And raping their women, the quickest way to strip men of their masculinity is to make sure that you send the message that you can't protect your women, okay, against anyone. All right. So I think that this whole misguided attempt for acceptance is very immigrant based. Other immigrant groups did it as well, but there's still that underrunning attempt to strip, in this case, Muslim men of their masculinity. And I think that the African American Muslim male initially resisted it and continues to resist it.
We do.
But unfortunately, I think you continue to resist it. But I think that, like you said, simultaneously, a lot of them have become the abusers themselves.
Yeah, a lot of the resistance is misplaced on the lower hanging fruit, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? It's like at the end of the day, like, remember, like, the systematic oppression is causing a trickle down effect. So why are we harder on the reactors than we are? Every time I see someone who is harder on the reactors of oppression, that's already, it automatically, okay, you're emasculated. You know what I'm saying? Because that's not.
I'm going to take a drink because I'm going to stop myself from talking. Because I have a whole lot to say about that.
We
some videos and stuff that have been running around. So I'm just like,
we'll have to continue this. We'll have to continue this conversation. But I've seen those videos, and it's inshallah. I want to do a video Quranically about some of the things that Allah actually says specifically to those who have been oppressed, and the freedom and the leeway that Allah has given those who are oppressed, including to the very language that you use when you're responding to oppression. Some of the ayahs in Quran that protect that are amazing, and it's why. And so for me, like, when I see people who are only like, because here's the thing, and this is the issue that we're having now. See. And this is why it's also very important for everybody to connect with the Quran itself, and why Quran is a miracle, and Allah has given everybody the permission and ability to do this. If you don't, then the people who you call leaders will be able to pick and choose which parts they feel are best for you. When what Allah's message is it's a whole idea. You can't, like, if you take one part and you misplace it, and you only make another part important without the other part, then you change the meaning of the whole thing. So, for example, forgiveness is a very important part of Islam, right? But just also an important part of Islam is giving the oppressed the ability to get back to come back and to protect themselves and to stand up for themselves.
We're not supposed to prefer our oppressors over ourselves.
Oh, no.
I need another drink.
No, absolutely not. And all we have to do is look at the prophets. You know what I'm saying? And during the stages where the prophets were persevering, one of the things that, I had spoken about this earlier, actually, when I was online. One of the main things that the prophets did as examples when they were persevering against oppressors, even when they weren't fighting back, is they all said, look, if you don't stop your way, oppressor, you're going to hell. And that was their constant communication to the oppressor. So guess what? When you see your leader with the courage to unapologetically say, okay, maybe we're not fighting, but at least he's speaking truth to power.
Yeah.
Then you respect that. But when you see the only thing the leader does is jump on the ones who are low hanging, and then you never see that same fervor towards the ones who are actually oppressed, then this is not prophetic. And this is what I call, like, where it's partial Islam, because they're not telling a lie, they're just not saying the whole truth. You see what I'm saying? They're not actually telling. So, and that's what confuses a lot of people who don't get it. So, example, it's really dangerous to those who are not affected and sensitive deeply to some of the things that oppressed people go through, because they'll look at it and go like, you know what, he's so right. all those people are just yelling and crying and complaining all of the time and it'll sound great because they're speaking from Quran and they're speaking from Sunnah and all of that. But all you have to do is go into that same Quran and that same Sunnah. You go, wait a minute. What happened? What happened when the Prophet ﷺ had to deal with the oppressors in this way? Wait a minute. What happened? He wasn't all just forgive, nice in some occasions. In some places, he had to, he had to take care of his business, right? And what you find, and then the other thing that you find is that they live, in all cases, when they're dealing with the oppressor, they live amongst the downtrodden. That's the other thing that they choose to do, and they don't have to. They might deal with the politics and go and engage the politics, but when they go back to where they go where they tend to live and stay amongst. Prophet Musa alayhi salam had the look where he had the ability to live, and he said, nope, I'm going to live with my people.
Yeah.
And I think that what that does is it makes you sensitive to the issues that oppressors are going through, so you don't make that mistake. Because I think in some occasions, I'm gonna be honest, I think in some occasions people are so disconnected, they think they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And I also think that they use that will erroneously use certain deeds to build up social capital, so that when they are actually violent and aggressive towards the oppressed, they try to fall back on those aspects. So it's like, Miss Anne, she used to give the slaves her old clothes. Okay, so she was good at deep down. Okay, didn't stop her from whipping one of them when she felt like it. Yeah. But it's just like good folk. Because she gave us those old clothes. All right, and so I think that there's a little bit of that going on. But I also think that one of the observations that I made is the reaction that African American Muslims in particular have to it, because it sounds the same. It's like something that we know it. It's like, it's just like, wait a second, what? Huh?
Yeah.
When our prophet, they were strong against oppression. Allah listens to the oppressor. He doesn't put any kind of specifications on it. Doesn't say the Muslim oppressed. He says the oppressed. Yeah. So a product of constant resistance to dehumanization and just destruction, that I'm supposed to prefer the people that are oppressing me over myself, and that's somehow more Islamic. Where is that in the tradition of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? Where is that? When is he told his followers to placate systems of oppression and groups of oppressors? I mean, it's one thing individually. He did things individually. Like, people love to throw up that whole, the old woman, which is weak, but still they love to throw it up. But it's just like, that's him.
But let's be real. She did.
How did he deal with the Quraysh? He was nice to that woman, but then how did he turn around and deal with the Quraysh? How did he deal with the leadership and everything like that? So it's just like, we see that. We're just
and
like,
how do you deal with the hypocrites who were in his community, or who were constantly pulling him down? Like, I don't think people want to really talk about that, because then I
wasn't ready for that, brother.
Your social capital might be in trouble when you start talking about how he dealt with the ones who spoke on both sides, which we have a lot of happening here. Allah knows best who that is, but let's be real. Let's be real.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, no, we don't want to really. That's why I say we like to take the parts that are convenient for. And like, here's the thing. And my point is this: like, look, if you have built up a certain amount of social capital and you're trying to build your institution or whatever, look, more power to you. Just be quiet on this other stuff. Like, just say, look, that part ain't my lane. Like, if you decide you don't want to deal with the press, look, I'm not saying everybody got to be a freedom fighter, right? But what you don't have the right to do is then come down and find the people who are actually fighting, kicking and clawing and doing everything they can to protect themselves and say you're wrong for that. That's like
messing up my game.
wait. Why don't you go back where you like? Why you gotta come down? And part of the reason for that is because they almost feel like, wait a minute, if you can't reveal like that, this is also a part of Islam. You know what I'm saying? So it's almost like, you know, it's like, what are you trying to protect, you know, and are you trying to protect the right thing? So we got to be really, really careful. You know what I'm saying? And so, you know, I think that, you know, I just think I would just ask certain people to just like, you know what, maybe you should just bow out of that particular comment. Maybe you should just say, look, this is not, I am now in a space where this is not really what I'm doing. I'm not into that right now. So I shouldn't speak on that because I can't really understand how the people who are going through it on the, you know, who are going through it the most, how they feel. So
Okay. Well,
I should just be quiet, you know?
and people, I'm going to probably become a pariah after this, but it feeds into that pattern. That's the reason why we see it, you know, and that's one of the things like Etan Thomas, he talks about, when he's doing the spoken word part of the video, he talks about passed down generational patterns. Okay. So the attack on Black Muslim masculinity, it has patterns of it. There are generational patterns that are passed down. So it's not the oppression of Blacks is a generational thing. It's a systematic thing. And we're not doing it solely to ourselves. Some of us may internalize it, but we're not doing it solely to ourselves. So if there's a generational pattern of oppression, there's a generational pattern of oppressors.
Yes.
The thing that disturbs me the most is that I know that this exists and my heart hurts so badly that it exists in my deen. And people are attempting to take something that I found so much humanity and power and even just emotional safeness. And they're even using that to keep up this generational pattern of oppression. Whether you're talking about racism in and of itself, okay, and there is Muslim scholarship that is very guilty of upholding systemic racism and even casual racism through the years as they were building themselves up. And no one said anything. And now it's like we're getting smacked down with it. And it's just like, look, this is the real obvious. Not surprising, but it's real obvious. Or let's go back to manhood. It's a matter of, there's patriarchy in Islam. Patriarchy in an Islamic context is a very positive thing. Our Prophet ﷺ was a patriarch. Musa was a patriarch. Ibrahim was a patriarch. So this whole idea that, you know, this is a completely bad thing is just inconducive to what Islam teaches about it. He made the people safe, and his words make you feel safe as a Muslim. And to have it used and exploited to somehow build on systems of misogyny and racism and capitalism is very, very disturbing. So in the context of manhood, okay, what is it that Muslim men can do to kind of recognize that there's this generational pattern, and that not only this, there's a cultural pattern, and we're at a point now we have to rediscover, or you guys are at a point, I'm not a man, but rediscover exactly what that means. Because in one hand, as a Muslim woman, this is my experience, I'm just talking about my own experience, and some Muslim women may agree with me, some may not. I found it very, very strengthening when I read about African-American Muslim men in particular, because that's the culture from which I stem, talking about being men, but at the same time, it's scared as hell. Because what do they mean when they talk about being men? Okay, because there are a lot of abuses that go on. They love to bash us left and right. Okay, so even not only we're not safe in the home, we're not safe culturally. Because everyone, again, and I love that video you did about Black women, loves to bash us. So there's just these conflicting feelings. So how is it that, what is it that African-American men can do? And I know it's not a simple answer, but what are some of the things that they can do to kind of make this conversation end more positively as opposed to that scared side?
You know, it's interesting. Before they killed Malcolm X, you know, he talked about how Islam, you know, he believed Islam was the cure for pretty much everything, including racism, even, you know, cure for, you know, the diseases the white man had, right? But I think that, so I think the number one, what he was just getting into, what he was just forming into, was, for one of the things about Malcolm that I really loved is that he had honesty and sincerity, right?
Yes.
And I think that in the beginning, the first thing we have to do is be self-honest. It's just like anything else. When a little bit of psychology 101 is, you first have to admit that there's a problem. You first have to say to yourself, there's a problem. You have to have conversations with yourself. The second, I mean, and one of the things that I feel like we're missing as men today is that we're not we're losing our spirituality as men. You know what I'm saying? Now it's either one extreme or the other. It's this kind of soft spirituality where, it makes you docile, or you're hard and then you don't have any spirituality at all. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that we have to get back to spirituality and regular spiritual practice, disciplined spiritual practice, that comes from the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. When you and I think to a T, the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam from a principle standpoint is a great example. And even it's the first generation of Sahaba, because when you look at them, they were very honest. When you read about their stories, they're very honest with each other. They're emotionally honest. And so from the beginning, I think one of the things that we, especially as Western men, have to get back to is being honest. Honest about our fears, our flaws. That means if we got to cry. That does not have anything to do with manhood or not manhood. But kill this facade. Kill this facade of looking cool or looking. Look, at the end of the day, and and amazingly, it actually starts with, there is no God but Allah, and therefore the please first, whatever that takes. So that honesty. Now, how do we be honest? Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, so it's a Furqan, that this is a book that discerns truth from falsehood, right? So one of the major ways to understand what is true and what is false is that we have to have a relationship with what Allah says is true and false, right? How else are you honest? Like, for example, if you're getting your ideas or your principles or your concepts from what you study from something else, really ever consulting what Allah said is true and what is false, then you're going to have a warped sense of what is true and false. So you can't be self-honest if you're not pulling from an honest source. Once you're honest, like, so for example, once you make a commitment to self-honesty, you will then say to yourself, and I've had to have many conversations with myself, like, look, dude, you got to step up. Like, it wasn't right what you did there. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to, like, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks this of you. And this one, I mean, we're talking about man up or a man's relationship to women. When you do that, when you have self-honesty, it becomes very, very apparent just by looking at what we have. Like, we got millionaires, we got people who are affluent, we got people who have all this education, but where are our actual structures that protect women? That should tell you right there. And until we have that, let's be honest and say we failing in that, right? So once we say, I'm failing this, right? The next thing is, what do we do to solve it? It starts with self. Like, what do I do? So if you, for example, married, and this is why, it starts with self and it starts with family. So if you're married, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, this is why it's very important. Allah talks to the man. One of the things I see it constantly say is, be kind. Be kind to your spouse, right? Overlook faults. You know what I'm saying? Nurture the relationship, right? These are the things it's saying. Cultivate compassion and love in the relationship, right? Now, being kind. Now, when you think of kind, I'm not talking about the patronizing kind of, oh, I'm gonna be nice to you so I can get what I want. You know what I'm saying? Because maybe kind in your situation means acknowledging that your wife is smarter than you and giving her the freedom to express that, right? Because if she doesn't, you know what I'm saying? Like, let's be real. Let's be real. You know what I'm saying?
You're gonna get some DMs today, brother. Say
no, because because a lot of times what happens is Muslim men are taught kind of this whole thing about how we supposed to be leaders and all of that, and we are, right? We kind of equate that to being, okay, we supposed to have the most intelligence and all, and most of the time it ain't even the case. No. You being assigned with being a protector and leader doesn't necessarily mean you as smart. Like, and when you look, let's take the CEO or the business arrangement. really the CEO, because he knows how to consult, or he or she knows how to consult the one who's directing, the manager or the director who's saying we should go this way, and he knows to make the decision to say, okay, you know what, you're right, let's go. And this is prophetic. Prophet Sallallahu used to, what did he used to do? He used to constantly consult those who he led, right? So at the end of the day, you know, once you get over the fact, once you know, the other thing, let's say the Quran talks about, and this is what I mean by self-honesty. Allah says to stand up for truth against yourself. And he says that first, against yourself first, right? So what that means is that, like, for example, if you're governing a relationship and Allah gave you a certain amount of power, then the first thing you can do, you have the power to say, if something goes wrong, what did I do first? Mm-hmm. But there are a lot of situations now where the first thing something happens and we want to say, well, you did. But if you have the power, you have more responsibility to see what you did first, because you have the power to change it more than the other person if they give you that, if they decide to give you that power, right?
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting because there's you talk about the broken little boy, okay, and how a woman doesn't want to deal with a broken little boy. And a lot of times that's exactly where the abuse stems from. It's not necessarily a broken little boy. It could also just be someone that doesn't know what they need to do and doesn't know where to look, you know. And so when we peel back those layers, that's what we see. We see this inability to know what to do and how to act. Now, that is a challenge in and of itself, okay? But it's augmented when you have leadership that feeds this messaging of dominance over kindness, of self-centeredness over service, being a service leader. And so it is like this film. My son loves to say, you know, like you have a bottle. Okay, there's something in that bottle all the time. If it's not water in the bottle, there's air in the bottle, because if it wasn't air in the bottle, it'll collapse. Okay, so there's something in that bottle all the time. So what are they filling that bottle with has caused a lot of problems in African American Muslim relationships across the board. Is leadership, do you see leadership as ready to make this transfer into developing a better understanding? You know, there was this great, I'm sorry I missed it, the Black Muslim Psychology Conference, where they had like this imam roundtable, and then they gave them case studies. And there were some issues with the approach that a lot of the leadership wanted to take when it came to one case study that basically made someone that was in an abusive situation even less safe or more safe. And so is leadership ready to understand that, you know, there really needs to be kind of like this? And now we really have Islam. We have Islam, like with the Nation of Islam, it's a heretical group. And so we had this positive message, but we didn't have the Islam. When we got this Islam and the positive message took the back seat, and now we have Islam. Can we now put the two together? Leadership.
Yeah. I think we can. I mean, we can, you know, but we have to actually, I mean, one of the things we have to do is, I think we have to stop trying to control, like lead, and stop trying to control. You know what I'm saying? And that comes from having a security in who you are. You know what I'm saying? Like, at the end of the day, I'm a flawed human being just like everybody else. You know what? But I'm trying my hardest. And when you, it's something about trying your hardest and not regretting what you do that allows you to shed some of the insecurity that allows you to just lead and lead. You know, so I think we can. You know, I do think we can. Is it going to happen? Allah knows. I'm gonna be honest. I don't know, because one of the things that I find is that who we decide or who we choose to put in the position of leadership in the first place. A lot of times, you know, today they aren't really actually people who understand people as well as they might understand state doctrine or anything. You know what I'm saying? Where, you know, and I think that when we get to the state where we hold importance people who understand people, and they work together with those who understand doctrine, and they consult and they teach each other, and everybody knows their place, then it'll work a lot better. And Allah knows best whether I'm gonna be honest, I don't know whether that happens. I just think that wherever we are, whoever, understands that, hey, look, we are in a place now where we have to do this.
Yes.
And, and just work towards it and work with your fellow people who have like mind, then you know what, and then give the results to Allah, because Allah He really actually controls results. We just put in the effort. And then I think that it'll rise where it rises, and it's going to be. And we're in the last days, so I don't really know, because I just feel like the other thing is we probably the last days, and it's a lot of trouble right now.
Yeah, there's always a lot of trouble though. It comes in waves. If you ever read, like, really read up on.
Oof. Totally dropped out. I can't hear a word.
To the kitchen. He's like, my little girls need something to eat, so I gotta feed them. Okay, so now that's a good segue, because all right, so we don't know about the leadership, but individually, men, the husbands, the fathers, can what is it that they can do? One of the things that Etan Thomas said, in the to become. So we have something. We even if it's something about, even if it's like looking at what not to do, and I think we have examples. And the best example to shift, at least even on a communal level or even on an individual level, so that there are more functioning households in African American Muslim culture. So what are some of the things that the Muslim man can do
as an individual? I mean, again, as I was saying before, it actually starts with it starts with that honesty, and then after that, you try to build a little bit more beyond your scope. Just always be trying to evolve. Like, at the end of the day, like, it's very difficult to understand how to first you have to learn how to manage yourself, and then you have to learn how to manage your family. Then you have to learn, after you're learning how to manage your family, and in the midst of that, then you have to start learning how to, once you get there, what can I do to help the greater community a little bit more? You know what I'm saying? And always be in a state of, like, at the end of the day, like, to whom much is given, much is expected. So if, everywhere where Allah says, they say He chose somebody for a certain job, that also means the responsibility is there. We have to remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about how He chose the Jews. He chose them, and then look what happened when they, He chose them, He saved them, and then what happened when they, afterwards, after they were saved, they had issues, worshiping other than Allah. So the bottom line is that this world is a world where service, like you said, service is, you just dig into the fact that service is going to be what you have to be mostly about. Is, that this life is a life where, and especially because you are given the freedom, there's a certain amount of freedom that comes with being taxed. You got to serve more, and every guy who I know who's responsible, family man, what they're doing? They're spending most of their time working. They spend most of their time doing what they got to do in service, right?
Definitely.
Right.
Definitely.
Yeah. And so, and the only thing that I feel like when we find more models of that and mentors like that in Baltimore, I work with a number of brothers who are mentoring programs to basically model that for young African Americans, to model that, look, the difference between a boy and a man really is that a man does what he's supposed to do, and a boy does what he wants to do. You know what I'm saying? When you get older, now you got to do more what you're supposed to do, and then then do what you want after what you're supposed to. You got to flip it. When you're young, as a kid, you can kind of get to do what you want, play around. When you become a man and grow up, now you got to, put on the back burner your personal desires. It's not that you have to get rid of them, because there's something you still got to take care of yourself and love yourself. But that first and foremost, what do I have to do? And it's funny thing is, there's basic Islam, there's basic principles in Islam that inform, inform a man on what he's supposed to do. One is stand up for justice against yourself, but also against others if they oppress other people. Look out for those oppressed. Forgive. You know what I'm saying? Be kind. Be strong. You know what I'm saying? Constantly pray. These are very, give of your wealth if you have more. Constantly give. All these things are trainings, and all these things are teaching you how to be a communal servant. You know what I'm saying? And save yourself. You know what I'm saying? Save yourself. Reinforce your belief. And we have to get more serious, serious about those things. Like, for example, look at your leisure time. Like, at the end of the day, when you become a man, and a lot of times we have, a lot of us had issues. And you become a man, play video games a little bit less, man. Because really, at the end of the day, you got to be doing things that are efficient. Like, okay, video games is the way you release or relax or whatever, fine. If you find yourself playing 5-6 hours a day, you know what I'm saying? And then you might have an addiction and a problem. You know what I mean? That's a little bit, because at the end of the day, outside that window, it's a lot of suffering and madness going on. And as Muslims, as witnesses to mankind, as Allah has told us we have to be, we have even a bigger responsibility to, we can't sit and rest on our laurels. We have a little bit more, so it's love. On another note, and this is why we have to have a little conversation, because there's a whole lot to this too that I think that's happening, actually hurting men too. And that's that on the other side of things, there are men who are too docile and don't love themselves and don't look out for themselves and don't draw their own lines. You know what I'm saying? And the result of that is that they're not respected, And look, like, for example, in marriage, I tell guys, like, look, man, you also have to draw the line for what you need to do to have your own peace, because you can protect your family better when you draw the line for your own peace.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So in a Western world, more and more and more, for example, there are laws that protect the women to be able to do what they have to do. So now there are situations, let's be real, there are situations where we have men being taken advantage of too. Yes. But as a man, your job is to draw that line and not be taken care of. Like, you can't go and make an excuse that, okay, you know what? No, Allah told you to also standing up for yourself.
Yes.
Your family better. So that's a whole another thing. Self-care. Yeah.
And the system is set up so that men can, the system is set up so that men can do that. That's that. I think that one big difference is that if a woman stands up, especially when a woman that comes with this, okay, when she stands up, there are systems that are in place to definitely make sure. I'm not talking about society. Yeah. About that make it difficult for her to do so, and less so when it's male, no matter what the complexion, that inside that, because at the end of the day, they have the women as supporters in what they need to do, and so it's like when you have that, you're able to do those things. With women is that they don't have that support system. But it's interesting because you're saying about what men should do, and I just want to give like one little caveat. A lot of that goes unnoticed. A lot of it is going to go unnoticed. So he hates when I do this, but I'm doing it anyway. I'm doing a story. Like, my daughter came to me because she spent one afternoon with her father. Okay. The oldest one, my college student. And she came home and she said, "Mom, Dad works really hard. I couldn't work the way that he worked. I'm so glad that he's doing it and I don't have to." Because she didn't realize, she never realized. And you know, we have 6 kids, and even myself, we always have a difficult time really appreciating exactly everything that it is that he does, you know, and then when he comes home, the stuff that he does. And you know, a lot of times that may go unappreciated or just unrecognized. It's something that you do, which kind of like indicates how safe he made her. You know, is that he even made her safe from knowing how hard it is that he has to work just to make sure that she has what she needs.
True. You know, and most men, you know, most men who are like that, they're not jumping around. They're not necessarily looking for the credit. You know, they're not trying to, okay, you didn't tell me. But what hurts sometimes is when like they do all of that and then they're constantly told that it's not enough. You know what I'm saying? And that can be hurtful. But again, a lot of times men's response to that is to just kind of go into themselves and resent quietly, as opposed to just voicing and saying, you know what, that actually hurts. Can and talk it out, because that actually is all you have to do is do that. Your woman will actually see you more as a human when you do that, because sometimes that, you know, they have both male. One of the things that, you know, that I think is like we have to realize is that power for both men and women is a test. Like power is a major test. So if a law gives the woman power and certain things, like let's not act like men and like either of us do well with it most of the time. Like let's be real. Like let's be real. But we all got issues. Just that a lot of times men have in the world to date, a lot of men have had more of that privilege than women.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, in a lot of family situations today, you find that power dynamic has changed, right? And it's not necessarily going as well either, right? Because at the end of the day, let's take work situations. I mean, how many times have we been in work situations where too many sisters come to me or women come to me and tell me, like, you know what, I'd rather have y'all as a boss as a man, you know, because women are catty or whatever the case may be. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying that to down. What I'm saying is that
the power.
It's about power. The power is the test. At the end of the day, Shaitan gets to us. Like at the end of the day, Shaitan got jealous. Allah chose Shaitan before he betrayed. He was a chosen one. He was a standout, right? And at the end of the day, it was like, wait a minute, but I got more than this human being. Like, why do I have to? Like, I don't understand why I have to. You know, and I can tell you, I can see it as a test for women, because especially like women today, especially they seeing like, wait a minute, I know I'm smarter than this dude. Why he gonna tell me what to do? And I get that is a test. That's gonna be, especially if you don't know what he's doing. That's not easy. You know what I'm saying? I'm saying that I believe that the way this is gonna work is that women and men are gonna have to work together. Huh? What'd you say?
I said, you heard it all live, folks. How the heck you expect a woman to listen to you if you don't know what you're doing?
You don't know what he's doing. Like, and I get that's a test. Like that ain't easy. Nobody wants to deal with that. Like, and you as a woman, because when we talked about in a women video, she knows she's surviving all her life, and this rookie comes along is going to try to tell her, she like eyes rolling this way, and I get it. Like I understand it. Like that.
You know, focusing on whether or not I'm wearing the cob, and we got all this stuff going on. Can we just let that go? Yeah, Can we let that go for a minute? Let's deal with all of this over here.
And I'm gonna tell you what, and in this day and age, if you're a woman and that's what you got to deal with, you got to really consider who you choosing as your leader. Let's be real. I'm gonna be honest, because come on, man.
Listen, I've seen men ask if women can ride bicycles. Okay, if they're supposed to wear pants. All of this minutia. And it's like these huge things that are going on that we need to take care of.
Yeah. And power has gotten to our heads.
I should wear black.
Yeah. You know, and that's what power does. If power is not dealt with humility, then it'll dumb you down and make you stupid. And that's what you find when we look at what's happening with white supremacy. When we look at what happened with misogyny.
White House. Let's be honest.
Yeah, exactly. It's just it makes you stupid. And so, you know, we have to deal with power very, very, very delicately. Like when a law gives you something, don't look at it as, oh, I'm better. Look at it like, oh, crap. Let me make sure I handle this right. Let me make sure I do this right, because, you know, like there's a, this position is a position of responsibility. Like there's a lot that I have to, worry about. Yeah. That's my wife texting me, like telling me I need to.
All right. We got to do another one, though. We have to do another one.
This is, yeah.
You're not going to have that sister mad at me. I'm out. Tell her I respect it. Jazakallah. Tell her Jazakallah. For being so patient, because I did take a lot of your time up. And I'm done. No, the woman has spoken. The wife has spoken.
You see what I'm saying?
We'll do another one, inshallah.
Like,
maybe she can come
and really, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you gotta go deal with that. And I'm saying, like,
go deal with it. Go have fun. Eid Mubarak and Jazakallah. Yeah. And thank you, everyone, for.
Hello. I think I'm done.